Welcome to everyone. Lecture number 7 and 8, classification of weeds. The classification of weed classify based on a various type. First upon we see the based on economic importance. So based on economic importance, the weeds are classified in two types, like relative weeds or absolute weeds. Relative weeds, those weeds are unwanted plants, but some weeds have economic importance, like Sanodactylum, Sorghum helipens, Echinoclova species. These weeds are used as a fodder, and Saccharum species and Typha weed are used in a cottage industry. Okay, the weeds have some economic value, some economic importance. It's called as a relative weed. And some crop plant in another crop field, which is a not desired, is also known as a relative weed. Example like sorghum plant in a cotton field is a relative weed. Some weeds are used in a preparation of drugs and medicine, having a economic importance. Okay, then next one is absolute weeds, means the weeds have a no economic value. This weeds is called as the absolute weeds. Okay, the weeds have a no any economic value. The example like Amaranthus spinosus and Euphorbia hirta. Then classification based on a lifespan or life cycle. The classification based of life cycle or ontogeny, the classified as annual weeds, biennial weeds or perennial weeds. First they based on a life cycle, first classified as annual weed. Annual weeds means weeds can grow and mature within a year, but more commonly they complete their life cycle in one season according to their season or occurrence. Annual weeds can further classified as kharif annuals, winter annuals or summer annuals. So kharif annuals means those weeds which comes and tend to complete their life cycle in a warm and wet season or a kharif season. It's called as a kharif season weed. Example like Digera arvensis and Cassia tora. Then winter weeds. Winter weeds means those weeds which complete their life cycle during a cool or dry season. Example like Chinopodium album. So you can see the slide. First weed is a Comelia bengalensis, then Digeria muricata or Chinopodium album. Then third one is a summer annuals. Summer annuals or summer weeds means those weeds which grow or complete their life cycle during a hot or dry season. Example like a Solanum nigrum. This weed is a summer. Okay. Then biennial weeds. Biennial weeds means they complete their life cycle in a 2 years. In the first year they remain in a vegetative stage, and the second year they produce the flowers, fruits and seeds. So their example is the Dacus caruta. Then perennial weeds. Perennial weeds grow for more than 2 years depending upon the species. In the first year they generally do not produce a seed but start the seed production. Thereafter they are capable to propagating by seeds, rhizomes, tubers, stolons, roots and suckers. For example, Sorghum helipens, Cypress rotundans, Sanodactylus is the example of perennial weed. Then classification based upon their morphology. Based on a morphology of the plant, the weeds are classified into 3 categories. This is the most widely used classification by the weeds scientists. First is the grasses, means narrow leaves. Grasses have a narrow leaves. All the weeds which comes under the family Poaceae are called as grasses, which are characteristically having a long, narrow or spiny leaves. Example like a Cynodon dactylon. The next classification is the sedges. The weeds belonging to family Cyperaceae comes under this group. and the leaves are mostly from the base, having a modified stem with or without tubers. Example like a cypress rotundus means lavala. Then broad leaves weed. These plants are also called as dicots. Broad leaves weeds have a vein that radiate from a larger vein. Broadleaf weeds typically have a taproot system. An example like Diger arvensis, Amaranthus virides, or Tridax procumbus. Okay, this is the example of weed. First one, you see the images. It's a Digeria, then cypress, then Salvinia molesta, then this weed is Eclipta, then Marcellia, then Chlorella. Okay, then classification based on origin. They classify as indigenous weed or introduced weed. First, indigenous weed. Indigenous weeds means the majority of the weed of a tropical climate have a origin in India. And their example is the coxcomb, Apitulan indicum, aghada, dudhi, hariyali. These are indigenous weeds, or it is also called as a apophytes. This is also called as a apophytes. Then next one is the introduced or exotic weeds. These are the weeds introduced from other countries. These weeds are normally troublesome and control become difficult. Many weeds move from the place of their origin by the seeds or other parts of a new area and establish there become introduced weed. The introduced weed is also known as the alien weed or anthrophytes. So indigenous weed is called as apophytes and introduced weed is called as anthrophytes. And their example is a Parthenium hysterophorus. Parthenium hysterophorus are come in India from USA, and Lantana camera are come from Sri Lanka by birds. Then next classification based on association. Based on association, they are season bound, crop bound, and crop associated weed. First, season bound weed. Season bound weed are seen in the particular season of the crop. These are either summer annuals or winter annuals. For example, like a sorghum helipens is a summer perennial and Cirsium arvensis is a winter perennial. Okay, these weeds are only seen in a particular season. Example like a Phalaris minor or Avena fetua are a winter season annual weed, and these weeds are come under the wheat crop. Okay, weeds grow in a specific season of the year with disregard to crop species cultivated. Johnson grass in a summer perennial weed. Then crop bound weeds. Crop bound weeds, weed which usually dependent on the host crop, particularly or fully for their nourishment. That is a parasitism, also called as a parasitic weed. Those weeds which depends for their survival upon their host plant for the nutrition is called as a parasitic weed. They depend for their survival upon their host plant for nutrition, particularly or fully. Those parasites which attack roots we called as the root parasites, and those weed which attack on a shoot of other plants is called as a stem parasites. Okay, this is a root parasites or stem parasite. So first one is a root parasites. So root parasites, another they divided into two types like a complete root parasites and partial or semi root parasites. So complete root parasites means, or their example is the orobenchi or a broom rap, and their host plant is a tobacco. The orobenchi is a weed and they attack on their roots of tobacco is a complete root parasites or partial root parasites. The striga is a weed or a witch weed. They attack on all millets like a sorghum, bajra, okay, on their roots. Then stem parasites, complete stem parasites like cuscuta, another name is a dodder. They attack on a lucerne or berseem plant. Then partial stem parasites, example like loranthus. Loranthus parasitic weeds attack on a fruit crop. और complete stem parasite का है cuscuta, and then partial stem parasite is the loranthus. So this is a cuscuta weed and this is a orobanche weed. So cuscuta is attack on a, it is a total stem parasites, and orobanche is a total root parasites. Okay, this is a striga, partial root parasites. This is cuscuta. Then crop associated weed. Such weeds grow along with crop due to their requirement, microclimate, and habitat, and survive along the crop in form of mimicry. May be the associate with a certain crop for one of the following causes, like a need for a specific climate. For climate, a weed like a chicory seeds or chicory weed, swine grass require shady or cool and moist climate, and this habitat for their best growth, which is available with a crop like lucerne and berseem. And for mimicry, weeds with a similar morphological character, like a similar stem or foliage like the crop, and it's called as a mimicry. Okay, so wild oat in a wheat and barley crop in a wild rice. Then redecontamination of crop seed with the weed seeds. So wild onion, wild garlic, canary grass mature their seeds at the same height and time as a winter grain, and thus they easily contaminate the crop seeds at a time of crop harvest. Example like a chandvel in a wheat or sugarcane or orchard fruit gardens. Then next one is the classification based on a soil pH. Based on a soil pH of weed can be classified as three categories: acidophile, neutrophile, or basophiles. So acidophiles weeds means they grow in acid soils, or weeds habitat as a acid soil. Example as the Rumex acetosella or Pterygium. Then basophiles, the weeds dominate in a saline or alkaline soil. They grow in a alkaline soil. It's called as basophile weeds. The example is the Salsola species or Sporobolus diander. Then neutrophiles, weeds grow in a neutral soil. Example like Acalepha indica. Then classification based on their place of occurrence. So in that first one is a weed of a crop lands. The majority of weeds infested in cultivated lands and cause the hindrance to the farmers for successful crop production. Example like Phalaris minor in a wheat. So weed have a tendency to have the life cycle similar to that of a cultivated plant, and the example is the amaranth species. Then weeds of a pasture land, weeds found in a pasture land and grazing found is called as the weeds of a pasture lands. Example like Indigofera anophylla. Then weeds of a wasteland, the weeds grow in a corner of fields, margin of channels, where weed grow in a profusion. So their example is the Calotropis gigantea. Then weeds of a playground or roadsides, they are usually hardy, postrate perennial, and capable of withstanding any amount of trampling, like a Tribulus terrestris. These weeds around the roads. This is the pictures of weeds like a Phalaria minors, then Indigofera, Inephylla, then Calotropis gigantea or Tribulus terrestris. Then a special classification like a poisonous weeds. Poisonous weeds, these weeds are secrete the poison. Okay, the poisonous weeds are secrete the poison. Example like a Dutura. Parasitic weeds, these weeds which dependent for the survival upon their host plant for the nutrition. Example like Orobanche or Cuscuta. Then obligate weeds, these weeds which grow or occur primarily in a cultivated field where land is distributed frequently. Weeds which grow primarily in a cultivated field. Okay, and their example is the bindweeds, Convolvulus arvensis, and then noxious weeds. Noxious weeds, the weeds which are undesirable, troublesome, and difficult to control, are called as the noxious weeds. An example like a nutgrass, hariali, parthenia. Then next one is the objectional weeds. Then objectional weeds, weeds which produces seeds that are difficult to separate once mixed with the crop seeds, is called as the objectional weed. The mixture of pura dhotra seeds in a mustard or a wild onion in a cultivated onion. Then facultative weeds or apophytes. So facultative weeds, the weeds which are a wild community, weeds which grow in a or not in a grow in a not in a cultivated field. Okay, and it's also called as a apophytes, but may sometimes escape to cultivated in a fields, or their example is the parthenium or cactus. Then associated weed means non-parasitic weeds, the weeds which are non-dependent on other crop for its development and growth. An example like Avenia fatui or Chicorium intubus. Then industrial weeds, the weeds invading areas around the buildings, highway, railway lines, fence roads, or electrics and telephone pole bases, is called as the industrial weeds. And their example is the parthenium, reshim kata, and katamate. Okay, this is the classification of weed. Thank you.